Well done.
Nigel Dodds.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. And may I begin, as others have, by paying tribute to our armed forces and servicemen and servicewomen, particularly those from our part of the world, the 1st Battalion, the Royal Irish Regiment, and the 1st Battalion, the Irish Guards, who are also serving at the current time in Afghanistan, but to all of our men and women in the services who are giving valiant service in Afghanistan and previously in other theatres of operation. And of course, those of us who represent Northern Ireland have reason, perhaps more than most, to value and to put on record our admiration for the armed forces, who, as the Right Honourable Gentleman for Lagan Valley pointed out, we owe so much to in terms of the current peace process. Whilst people sometimes go around claiming all sorts of credit on a political front, I think the greatest credit goes to our security forces in the Army, the UDR, the police and the reservists, and all of them, who held the line and protected innocent men and women. And whilst there is so much temptation nowadays to revise history, the truth should be told very clearly that they were the ones who defended democracy and brought about the conditions for the current political progress and peace in Northern Ireland. We've had a very good debate, I think, Madam Deputy Speaker, and I want to thank all who have participated in it and who have been here throughout the proceedings. My right honourable friend, in moving the motion, talked about it not being a party political issue and about the tone of the debate, and I think that has been reflected in the contributions here today. I welcome the fact that the motion has the support of the government and other members and other parties in the House. And I too pay tribute to the sincerity and integrity of the Secretary of State and his ministers, and indeed to the integrity and sincerity of the previous occupants of their office, who, I think it has to be said, we all recognise that are doing their very, very best in very, very difficult circumstances for our armed forces. And I think that needs to be recognised. And our purpose in tabling this debate today was simply to continue, as other members have mentioned, to continue to highlight and put on record our support, first and foremost, for our armed forces, because I think we shouldn't underestimate how important it is to our servicemen and women, particularly those who are in theatre and battling the enemy, to know that the House of Commons, the Parliament, that members of Parliament are spending time recognising their service, recognising some of the difficulties they face and the challenges we all face, but first and foremost putting on record our deepest gratitude and appreciation for what they're doing. And I think sometimes we sometimes say, well, things have been debated, and we know there was a debate on the 16th of February on this issue, but it is well worth spending as much time as possible on this issue, and what is more important than issues of life and death and war in terms of our servicemen and women. At my first contribution to the Prime Minister's questions in this Parliament, I raised the issue of the military covenant, and I asked the Prime Minister at that session on the 2nd of June 2010, right at the outset of a new Parliament and a new administration, to give a categorical assurance to our troops that they will always get the equipment and resources that they need in operational duty, to give a commitment to our servicemen and women returning home that they would always get the help and advice they need to return to civilian life, and to our maimed and wounded servicemen and women that, despite all the budgetary pressures, they will always get the care and compassion that they need and deserve for however long it takes. And I think that is something that we certainly as a party, and I know that many honourable members and right honourable members from all parties take very, very seriously indeed. Now, we've heard from many excellent contributions from both sides of the House, and the right honourable gentleman from Lagan Valley who moved the motion did so extremely eloquently. He mentioned the fact that 20% of the reserve forces currently serving are from Northern Ireland, which I think illustrates the contribution that Northern Ireland men and women are making to the war effort. And it should be borne in mind that people have mentioned about the voluntary nature of service, and quite rightly so. And it needs to be pointed out again that in Northern Ireland there's never had to be conscription, even during the Second World War. And I think that is a measure of the support that there is. Something that the member for Strangford mentioned, I thought, in an excellent speech in which he talked about the close association of people in Ulster with the armed forces, illustrated indeed by the service of people in his own constituency office. And I think that that is something that comes across day and daily, not only an appreciation for the work that the Army and the armed services did in Northern Ireland on the streets in maintaining the peace and defending democracy and life and limb, but also how many people within Northern Ireland have relatives who serve or are serving in the armed forces. The Right Honourable Gentleman also mentioned the fact that we need to meet the needs of veterans, those that have served in not just in service many years ago, but those who are serving in current conflicts, and the fact that when it comes to the big society, he mentioned the issue of the Royal Irish Regiment Band, and in the context of things that may seem something that is relatively trivial, but it is an important aspect in recruiting and raising money for charitable purposes for servicemen and servicewomen. The Secretary of State did talk about the measures which the government have introduced since taking office in terms of doubling the operational allowance, the rest and recuperation rules, the scholarships in terms of university and further education to children of those killed, the pupil premium, and on mental health the actions being taken there. And I welcome what he said about the 24-hour helpline, the extra money that's going in, but I think there is a need to ensure that on mental health that there is continuing monitoring and keeping in touch with servicemen and women even over the years, so that they don't drop out of the system or that they don't get forgotten about or left behind. And I also welcome his commitment to look into the point raised by my honourable friend from North Antrim in relation to housing and the importance that servicemen and women should be given in terms of all of that. The honourable gentleman from North Durham, speaking for the opposition, highlighted the previous government's actions, and I do commend the previous government for the action, as some honourable members did on the other side, for actions that they took, the command paper that was brought forward, the progress that was made. He did acknowledge that there were deficiencies, especially, for instance, in the area of housing, but I think that we did make progress during the term of the last Parliament in recognising that members who have served do deserve special treatment, and particularly in the area of mental health. The honourable gentleman from Beckenham, I thought, spoke very passionately. He has, of course, great experience in this field, having served, as we were reminded, in Northern Ireland and as a company commander, and of course he knows at first hand what it is to comfort and care for his troops, and he reminds us of the dedicated service of so many in Northern Ireland over the years in the armed forces. And he rightly asked the question about what the nation requires of our troops, the courage that they display going into battle, and the physical sickness that sometimes they can even feel as they anticipate what comes. But he asked very pertinently the question that what the nation requires of our troops. In return, they ask what they expect from our nation, and that is a very proper question. The honourable gentleman from Upper Bann, who spoke, and he has a very good track record in supporting our servicemen and women. He recently took part, and has done for a number of years indeed, in raising significant amounts of money for Help the Heroes personally through sponsored walks and organising other charitable activities, and I pay tribute to him for that. He mentioned that the UK Armed Forces are the best in the world, and we all subscribe to that. And he too dwelt on the issue of the military covenant. And the honourable gentleman for Colchester, who speaks so often and so eloquently and so strongly in defence of our armed forces, talked about the Armed Forces Covenant, that we shouldn't be too prescriptive, whilst paying tribute to the Royal British Legion for continuing to keep this matter on the agenda. And he made a very good point, I thought, about war widows and the need for identification, and also, of course, on housing and education. The honourable gentleman for yes, I will.
Speaker. The honourable gentleman talks about prescriptiveness, which was a theme of the opposition. We agree with the Deputy Chief of the Defence Staff, the Adjutant General, the Deputy Chief of the Air Staff, the Second Sea Lord, the Chairman of the RAF Families Association and the Military Pensions Association that prescription and justiciable enforcement of a military covenant is not appropriate.
I thank the honourable gentleman for his intervention, and on the military covenant, can I just say that at the end of the day we all agree it's the help that's delivered that really matters. That is the crucial point that has been emphasised, I think, by members right across the board. We note what the Prime Minister said. I know that reference has been made to the letter from the Royal British Legion on that point. I think we do need clarification as to what is meant by referencing properly in law the military covenant. But I take the Secretary of State's point about definable rights and justiciability and so on about all of that. But I think that the way forward is to get the Royal British Legion together and others who are interested in this with the government to hammer out a way forward to which all parties can agree. That is the key point, and I would urge that step on the government. Can I also acknowledge the contributions from the members of Strangford, Plymouth, Sutton and Devonport, South Antrim and Filton and Bradley Stoke. And can I just in closing, Madam Deputy Speaker, pay tribute to the many thousands, tens of thousands of volunteers who take part in raising so much money for charitable organisations and charities across the UK, the Royal British Legion, Help for Heroes, SAFA, Not Forgotten Association, Army Benevolent Fund and Regimental Benevolent Funds who do tremendous work as well. And we should never forget their contribution, Madam Deputy Speaker. So thank you again to everyone who's spoken in the debate. I think it's been an excellent one, and we close in paying tribute once again to the excellent service of so many dedicated men and women in our services.